But every once in a while, Satan just puts this thing on you that says what you have to say is so driven and passionate inside you, and it's like rising up, and nobody's going to come. It just feels like, it's almost like a panic, like a terror, like, God, you've got this great thing coming, but nobody's going to come. It's like, just going to come out here and it's just going to be crickets. And so, like, when I say I'm glad to see you, I mean that. Like, literally, I'm glad to see you. Today, man, how many of you guys have been reading the ads in the bathrooms on the walls and around the church about the series that's coming up? Anybody read those? What was the series supposed to be? Unfair. For how many years have I been going to do the Unfair series? Like 3 years now. Well, evidently, when that series comes, it's going to blow you away. Every time I started to do that series, God put something else on me, and what He's put on me right now is timely, is relevant, and I just believe with all of my heart that what happens in the next 6 to 8 weeks is going to leave us forever changed. I believe what's going to happen in this next 6 to 8 weeks is going to move us and motivate us. It's going to change. It's going to transform our church. And I believe with all my heart it's going to transform your very existence. And I'm just so looking forward to it today. I'm going to get started with a question. Isn't it coincidental? Is that the question? Isn't it coincidental? Isn't it coincidental that you're here and I'm here, that we're here? Kind of coincidental, isn't it? It's kind of coincidental that I was born when I was born, and you were born when you were born, and we somehow moved to the same geographic location. It's kind of coincidental, isn't it? That we all kind of congregated to this area, and that we were born here, and we made our way here. It's kind of coincidental, too, that out of all of the things that we have available for us to do today, that we're here together. At millions of years. Do you realize the chances? I just want you to think of the chances of us being here together today at this time. There's been millions of years. And there will be millions of more years. There are millions of places. And somehow, we all congregate in this pinpoint minute in time, in this pinpoint place. Kind of coincidental, isn't it? No. Not at all. It's almost like somebody was up to something. There's this story in Esther in the Bible. And Esther was this beautiful Jewish woman. And what happened was King Xerxes had a queen, and the queen didn't respect him, so she couldn't come into his presence anymore. So Esther became queen through. You need to read Esther. It's great, man. You just really need to read Esther. But this Esther became queen, and what happened was she had favor with the king, right? Because he was more in love with her than anyone else. So she had favor with him. Well, and when Xerxes had promoted this guy up in his ranks, and he had become second in charge, and this guy was making people worship him and bow down to him and honor him and do all these things, like he was kind of setting himself up as all-powerful king. And Esther's uncle, which had taken her on as his daughter, overheard this plot this guy had made to kill all the Jews. He was furious. The guy was furious because Esther's uncle would not bow down to him, wouldn't honor him. And so he had made this decree up and got the king's ring to seal this decree. And he made this decree that all Jews on this one day, they were going to annihilate all the Jewish nation. They were going to completely wipe the Jews off the face of the earth. And they had decreed it, the king had sent it out, all the women, all the children, all the men, all the dogs, all the cats, all the fish, all the whatever else they were keeping as pets, the llamas, the pet llama. They were going to wipe the Jewish nation out. And so Esther's uncle sent a the king, and then everyone who came into the king's inner court would be put to death unless the king pointed his what do you call it? Scepter? Is that right? This big gold stick? Unless he pointed it at you. Then everyone else would be put to death who came into his presence except for the one who had found favor with the king. So Mordecai asked Esther to go before the king and plead for Israel. Okay, but she wasn't invited. So there was risk involved, right? Because there was a group of people going before the king that day. There was a group of people that were going to be going before the king that day. There was a group of Jews who all but one would be dead when they left the room. That's high risk, right? Do you think you have what it takes? No, that's not what's up. Here's what I want to put to you today, though. This is the dilemma that Esther was in, and here's what Mordecai sends to her. In Esther chapter 4, verse 13, it says this: "Do not think to yourself, in the king's palace, you will escape any more than the other Jews." Okay? Is this not 100% certain is what he's telling me? Don't think to yourself that you're going to escape more than any other Jew that's going before the king. But then he tells her this: "For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this." He says to her, it's not 100% for you. Okay? You're going before the king, and you could be put to death. You're going to go before with a lot of other Jews. But here's the thing: God's going to save the Jews. He's going to raise up someone somewhere. The Jews are going to be saved. They're God's people. They're going to be saved. But if he raises up someone else, you and your father could be put to death. You will be put to death. But who knows? Just maybe you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Just perhaps you're the one. Perhaps all of your life and all of the history of time and all of existence has come together for this one point, for this one place. Millions of years you could have been born, and millions of years in the future you could have been born, millions of places you could be, but just perhaps you've come to the kingdom for just a time as this. Perhaps you were meant to live for more than what you're currently existing for. Perhaps we all of time and all of space has come down to this point to bring you here, to bring us here to this one place, because God has something special for you. When Jesus was on earth, he came to seek and save that which was lost. He came to earth to redeem and restore all of creation to God. He came to earth to usher in God's kingdom, to bring about the kingdom of heaven. That's why Jesus came. And he came and he established his kingdom. And he came and he delivered up the captives. He set the captives free. He came and he healed the sick. He has healed the sick. He's come and he's mended up the brokenhearted. That was his mission here. And what I want to tell you about Jesus is that he came for such a time as this in his day. And he has called us out for such a time as this. He has brought us together. And I need to talk to you today about what's going on in our world, what's going on in the church today. And I want to tell you this right up front, that I am more passionate about what I'm going to talk about today than anything I will ever talk about from the stage. I am disgusted with church. I am sick to death of church. The church in America today, and I can't speak for the church anywhere else, the church in East Texas today. The church in East Texas today disgusts me. I don't want to be part of what's going on, and here's why. The church today in our world is Old Testament. In the Old Testament, you went out and you lived your life. You sinned, you did things, you made money, you did all these things. You went out and you lived your life. And then on the Sabbath, you would come to the temple and you would bring your offering and you would get cleansed and you would do all of these things. Then you would leave and you would go back out to your life. And everybody left their life and came to the temple. And they worshipped at the temple, and they prayed at the temple, and then they were cleansed and sanctified and purified. They offered up their sacrifices, they brought their offerings, they brought their tithe, and then they went back to their life. And that's the church we live in today. We live our lives out in the world, we go about our business, and then every weekend or once a month or on Easter, we come to the temple. And we give our offering, and we say our prayers, and we worship, and we ask for forgiveness, and then we go back out to our lives. And the church today is Old Testament. The church today is extremely Old Testament in nature. But let me tell you something. Jesus did not come to this world to plant a church. Everybody's like, Jesus planted the church. Jesus did not plant the church. Jesus launched a movement. And there is a major difference between launching a movement and planting a church. A church that's planted is stationary, and everything from outside comes in, they do their things, and they go back out. And then people who are supposedly called come in and become temple priests, and they run the functions of the temple, of the church, and they take care of the business, and they do the ministry, and they do the praying and the healing and the sanctifying and all of this stuff, and everybody goes back out into their lives. That was not what Jesus planted. Jesus launched a movement of the kingdom of heaven. And somehow that movement took off, and it spread all over the world. And not many generations after it spread all over the world, everybody reverted back to the church. And it became a church by the way we define church, or a church by the way the temple is described. But let me tell you the word Jesus said when he said, I will build my church, okay? Jesus said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. The word Jesus used was the word ecclesia, okay? That's the Greek word for church, okay? And the word church means gathering. That's all it means, gathering, okay? It means congregate or gather. So the church isn't a place, a temple, even the people with it's not there's a church, there's just people open the door, all the people. Remember? This isn't even the church. Okay? This isn't even the church. The word ecclesia it's really a compound word. And the first word, ek, is the word actually means the point whence motion or action proceeds. It's the point from which motion or action proceeds. The last part, ecclesia, means the called or the called out or the summoned. The word church Jesus used is a gathering and a sending of those called out to be separate. Those called out from life, from death to life. Those called out of the grave. Those called out of the world into his kingdom. And he says that this church or this place that is a gathering of the called out and a sending, a launch place of the called out. He said, this is my church, this is my ecclesia, this is my gathering, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. The church, and I need to distinguish right now, okay, I'm going to define, when I say church today, okay, in this talk, I mean the church as we see it. Buildings, programs, come in, go back out to your life. Come in, do your holy thing, go back out to your life. Come in, do your holy thing, go back out to your life. Okay, that's what I'm saying when I say church. But what God has moved upon my heart is that we will no longer be a Driven Life church, that we are a movement of God. Amen. That Driven Life is a Jesus movement. It's not a church. It's not a planted church. It's a movement of Jesus. And the way it looks is that, and the church Jesus started, it looks like this. People are called and give their life to the movement. And then they gather. Then they move. Then they gather. Then they move. Then they gather. Then they move. Then they gather. They go out and they minister and they bring the kingdom and they preach the good news. They heal the sick. They cast out demons. They set the captives free. They seek and save the lost. Then they gather. And when they gather, they're encouraged and built up and healed. And their wounds are healed. And they're taught and trained to go back out into the movement. And they go back to the movement. So it's constant. It's movement and gathering. Movement and gathering. Which is way different than go back to my life, do my thing, come back in, go to church, get all holy, go back out, do my thing, come back in. And we've got to extremely change the way we think of church. When I say to you church from now on, I want you to think of the movement. I don't want you to think of a place. I don't even want you to think of the people in a place. I want you to think of the church as the movement of Jesus. What does the movement of Jesus look like? Everybody thinks that, oh, wow, man, when I get saved, I'm all on fire for God. I just need to go now to the church. I need to go work at the church. I need to go serve at the church. I hear it all the time. I need to go serve at the church. I need to find my ministry at the church. I need you to hear this, and I need you to hear this clear. If all the Christians got saved on fire for Jesus and brought their ministry to the church, the movement will die. The movement will die. Do I have proof? The movement's died. Over and over in history, the movement of Jesus has died. But every once in a while, every few hundred years, there's a group of people that rises up and says, this wasn't what Jesus intended. Every once in a while, every few hundred years, there is a movement. There's an awakening. There's a realization that there is more to this life, that I was born at this time for more than this. That I was brought here with these people at this place and time, in this location, for more than to go to church with them. More than to all come together and do ministry for each other at the church. This is like, the way I see the church of America today is it's like a doctor's convention where all the doctors come in and practice on each other and then go back out and do nothing for anybody who's really sick. We just come in, we talk to each other, talk about each other, use holy language, do all this stuff, and then we go back out and do nothing for the people who are really sick, the people who are drowning, who are dying, who are hurting, who are captive, people who are prison, who are addicted, who are broke, who are down, who can't find life, who can't find truth. We just leave them alone because I can't wait till Sunday to get back with all the other doctors and talk about how good doctors are and how awesome we are, and we practice medicine on each other and say, I'm going to try this on you and you try that on me. That's the way the church looks. It's not a movement. The movement of Jesus is where like say 10% of the kingdom of heaven is called to the ministry of the local gathering. Okay? And the job of the ministry of the gathering, it says in the Bible, is not to minister, but to equip for the ministry. The job of the people in the church is not to minister, not to have office hours to minister, but to equip the movement for the ministry of the gospel of Jesus. The job of the gathering, those called to the gathering, is to heal and encourage and build up and train the body of Christ for the movement. That's what the church is here for. That's what the church's function is. the function of the movement is to move, is to take the gospel message, the kingdom of Jesus, the message that Jesus died for, the redemption, and the drawing people into his kingdom, and go into the world and heal and set free and deliver and encourage and build up and to give away life. And what drives me and what I'm passionate about is that I got transformed because I encountered Jesus. And I was forever changed, and he changed me. He gave me life. He gave me a new identity in him. And I think everyone needs it. I've got something that I want every person on the planet to have. That requires movement. It requires movement. Guys, God doesn't make mistakes. God, he's not in error. Where you're at in your life, you are there for a time such as this. You are where you're at for a time such as this. Are you ready for the movement? Do you want to take, do you want something? Let me ask you, do you have anything you want to give away? Is there anything in you that you think everybody else needs? Have you experienced anything in God that you think if every person in your life had what you had, our world would radically change? And until we get to the point where we're so passionate to say, what I've got, everybody needs. If there were 6 billion Todd Stories in the world, it would be an awesome place. I'm passionate about that because I believe Jesus is real. I believe God is real. I believe his kingdom is real. I believe his love is real. I believe his healing is real. I believe his freedom is real. And if it's not for you, you haven't experienced the Jesus that I know. He changes you. He transforms you. And when he does, we are called to the gathering. We are called to the movement. We move and we gather, and we move and we gather, and we move and we gather. And I'll promise you this, that I'm committed. I am committed with all of my life to train, equip, encourage, heal, and send you out. How does it look? There's you guys out there that get transformed, you're radically saved, and you experience Jesus. And you have a job, say a job in construction. Okay, it's a rough field, but how many construction workers are you going to reach if you quit your job and come to work in the church? Any that happened to stumble through? We had a guy come up here one night, we were at bed breakfast, came here drunk. He thought it was a bar. So there's always a chance. I'm not saying there's not a chance. But wouldn't the odds be better to reach the people that you're passionate for where you're at? Say God's given you a passion to minister to senior citizens. Would it be better to start a seniors ministry at a church? Or would it be better to get a job at a nursing home? Where is the kingdom? Where is the movement? See, the movement isn't here. The movement is, this is where the gathering is. This is where you're encouraged, equipped, built up, trained. Okay? I want you to feel like when you leave here, I want you to feel like you can take on the world. And when you get to the world, and ministry's hard. Okay? You guys who work in automotive industry, construction industry, anywhere where men gather, ministry's hard. But you were meant for a time such as this. You were called to this place at this time for a reason. Kitty, I'm going to use you for example. I didn't ask you before. Is that okay? About to put you on the spot. How long have you been at Walmart? 22 years. Kitty's worked at Walmart for 22 years, and I guarantee you that her church is 10 times the size of my church. Sometime in the time Kitty worked at Walmart, it went from being a job to a ministry. And when you go to Walmart, you're going to see employees, you're going to see customers, you're going to see employees bringing customers to Kitty for ministry. Because she was meant for a time such as this. Amen. The ministry, the movement is taking place at Walmart. The movement is happening at Walmart. And Kitty gathers here to be equipped, to be encouraged, to be built up, to be prayed for, to worship with us, and to be sent back to the movement. Now, I've heard Walmart described as a movement, but I don't think it was that kind of movement. See, do you understand what I'm trying to get you to see? Is when you're radically transformed and you're radically changed and you've got a heart for God and you think everybody around you should have what you have, you've got to rethink what you call ministry. Listen to me. If you hate your job, you need to quit your job. And you need to go back to that place and turn it into a ministry instead of a job. Because as long as you work on a job you hate, you're never going to be effective ministry in there. But when the job you hate becomes your ministry, your mission field, that's where Jesus has called you to. That's where he has placed you, and you were appointed for a time such as this. There is no accidents. God doesn't make mistakes. You were called into the ministry of the job you hate. Quit that job. Never go back to it as a job. When you go back to that job tomorrow, when you go back to that workplace, go back to it as a ministry, as part of the movement of Jesus Christ, and I guarantee you everything will change. Everything will change. When we started this church, we operate out of ignorance. What I'm telling you today is I'm awakening you. I'm opening your mind to see things different. When we started this church, I had a passion. I read the Bible, I read the New Testament. Jesus transformed me, and I had something that I desperately wanted to give away. I believe that Jesus came and he healed the sick. I don't believe he's going to someday. I believe he did. I believe he healed the sick. I believe he set the captives free. I believe he restored creation to God. I believe that he brought his kingdom of heaven to earth. And I believe that God's will should be done on earth as it is in heaven. If Jesus prayed it and God answered prayer, then why isn't it happening? And the only thing I knew about Christianity was church. I'd never seen it outside the church. I'd never seen a movement. All I'd seen is church. So I thought, where can I be the most effective in giving away what I received? And so I said, well, we need to start a church. We need to start a church. But I don't want to start a church that's like every other church that you got 50 to choose from within a rock's throw from here. I want to be a church for people who are burned out, who've been burnt, who are hurt, who are broken, who aren't accepted, who are outcast of society, outcast of school, outcast of their jobs, outcast of norm. I want to be a church for hurting, broken, messed up, addicted people. That's my people. That's what I'm called to. And I thought, wow, this is the way that you do it. And I felt called to start a church. And I didn't know how to put language to it. I knew what I felt, what I wanted to see, but I didn't know how to put language to it. Well, when we started the church, of course, you start a church with a handful of people, and you can't just do this. So God was always doing stuff. I got a job. I left my job in Dallas. I was a computer network engineer at the time. Had a good living, then 401k. I hadn't heard those letters put together since. I had insurance. I don't remember what that was about. I had insurance. And I left that, and I worked at the parts store here in town. And I I started out at $7 an hour. After the first year, I got a raise to 8. And I was rolling. Celia worked at a law office. And the whole time, we were frustrated because we wanted to do this with our lives. And what I realized after a period of time there was that the people God had put on my heart were standing in front of me every day. At the law office, Celia was dealing with broken families, people with injuries, all of these things. I was at the parts store dealing with everything. And what I realized was that when you work in that place like that, you become a bartender because people come to buy parts, but that's not what they're there for. They're there to tell you everything that's wrong with everybody else in their life. And so as I bartended at the parts store, I realized that this is my church. Celia was a receptionist, legal secretary, whatever, I don't know, correct, whatever. I don't want to offend anybody who works in law. She was there at the door. How about that? So she was talking to people. Hurt people, bitter people, angry people, disappointed people, destroyed people, people who were losing everything, people whose lives were totally messed up. And all of a sudden, instead of a job, there's a church. And Driven Life Church started to be built out of people from the park store and out of people from the law. And then their friends would tell their friends, and their friends would tell their friends. And the movement was happening. And we didn't have any idea what it was because it was just becoming. See, we set out to do something, but God is smarter than we are. God has a plan. If we don't see it, if we'll be obedient, we'll start to see that we're in His will, even though we don't know what label to put on it. And God began to launch a movement. A movement. Not a church. A church is planted. A church is set. It stays in a spot. And people come from outside in. But ecclesia, a calling and ascending, a calling and ascending, a calling and a launching, a gathering and a moving, a gathering and a moving. The church is a gathering and a movement. A gathering together like we're here today, and a movement like this afternoon when you leave here and you go back to your mission in the world. See, you don't have a lot. I forgot to tell you that part. When Jesus transforms you, He takes your life. And you don't have a life any longer because your life now is a movement. And it's not just on Sunday, it's a 24/7 movement. When Jesus came, what shocked the Jews is that they went to the temple and the teachings that Jesus passed on in the early church taught that don't you know that you yourselves are the temple. The temple went from being a place stationary to a movement. The temple now is a movement. The church now is a movement. What Jesus started was a movement. He launched into a movement. If you're called and you're passionate for kids, you know where you need to be? Schoolhouse. Everybody's like, man, I'm passionate for kids. I think I need to be a youth pastor. That makes sense in the church. Makes sense in the temple. It makes no sense in the movement. Because kids, at last check, we're at school. Kids are at the water park. You want to launch a movement? Get a job at the water park. What I'm saying is, whatever you're drawn to, whatever it is that's stirring inside of you, look at the people. Because God doesn't call us to do things, He calls us to people. Okay, I need you to understand that. I wasn't called to do something. I was called to a people group. I was called to broken, hurting people. I wasn't called to preach, teach. Everybody's like, are you called to preach? No. I'm called to people. God loves people. consumed by Him, transformed by Him, changed by Him, He's going to call you to other people. Because, well, just frankly, it's not about you. So I'm going to end like this. If you're looking for a church, you need to move on. I'm going to be honest with you. The reason churches have so much problems is because we're consumers. So you may be here today shopping for a church. And you're evaluating us on this or that or whatever. And that's a consumer mentality. And that's totally cool with me. But you're going to be extremely disappointed here. Okay? Because this isn't a consumer-based, consumer-driven organization. We're not going to have everything you need. The reason people get tired in the church and they'll stay here for so long and then they'll move on is because as long as everything's meeting their consumer need, they're happy. And the minute something doesn't match their consumer need or something else out there, frankly, does it better, we'll move on. I'm out here, I'm going over there. They got it going on over there. You know, it's Six Flags over Jesus. You know, it's amazing. I want to tell you this. If you're here today and you're looking for a church, you can move on because it isn't a waste of your time. It'll be ugly for everybody because you're not going to be catered to and you're not going to be, you know, baby, all of that stuff. You're just not. But if you're a Jesus follower and you want to be part of a gathering, this is your place. And when you come here, you're going to be equipped, you're going to be trained, you're going to be healed, you're going to be sent out, back out into the movement. For your life to make sense, you're going to have to be part of the movement. Or you're going to be disgusted in every church you go in if you're not part of the movement, because you're going to come here and you're going to not get what you want. But if you want to be encouraged, and you want to build up, and you want to be motivated, you want to be sent back out into the movement, and you want to be equipped for the movement, you're in the right spot. So I encourage you to wake up, to change the way you think, to see your life as part of the movement of Jesus, to see when we come together as the gathering of Jesus. And the function of that is for prayer and for worship and for teaching and for healing, those types of things that we're doing here to prepare you to go back into the movement. If you want to join a movement, this is the Driven Life movement. This is the movement of Jesus. You'll say, well, you know, we've always done that. Well, we're not anymore. It's over. Get over it. We're not a church, we're a movement. Churches function one way, movements function a different way. We're not a church. I want everybody, on the count of three, I want everybody to say out loud with your own lips, your own voice, we are not a church. Okay? 1, 2, 3. We are not a church. Okay. You need to understand that. Now, you don't need to just say it. You need to realize what I'm saying. We are not a church. Okay. Now, if you need a church, then I can recommend thousands. The problem is I don't know of any movements. We're the only movement in town, so welcome. The Driven Life movement is a movement of Jesus. We're here to seek and save that which was lost. In the nursing homes, in the schools, in the water parks, in the daycares, in the park stores, in the law offices, it's a movement. Do you get it? You understand what I'm saying? All right. Let me pray for you. God, I thank you so much for this time we got to come together. God, I thank you for choosing us and bringing us to this place in time that we were meant for more, God, that we were